Good morning and welcome back to World Talks. A parliamentary election is coming up in the Netherlands at the end of this month, earlier than planned, after the far-right PVV party pulled out of the ruling coalition back in June over disagreements on asylum policy. Now, just several weeks before voters head to the polls, anti-migration protesters have taken to the streets across the country, a sign that immigration remains one of the most divisive issues shaping this campaign. To help unpack all of this, I'm joined by John Dalhuisen, Senior Fellow, European Stability Initiative. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Good morning. Good morning.
So, to start, can you paint us a picture of the migration situation in the Netherlands? I mean, how many people arrive per year, perhaps? Has there been any significant change in recent years? What are the demographics? What are we dealing with?
Well, after an original kind of spike in 2015, coinciding with the first wave of the migration crisis, as it came to be called, where the Netherlands saw about 40,000 plus asylum seekers, there was a steady decline in towards the end of the 2000 teens. In the early 2020s, so 22, 23, 24, there was an increase in asylum seekers. It started to get close to 40,000 again. So there was definitely a rise 23, 24. And there's been a decrease this year. So it never quite hit the heights of 2015, but definitely the first few years of this decade saw a bit of an increase, and triggering once again the popularity of anti-immigrant far-right parties. The central one, the PVV, has been urging much stricter asylum policies and recently walked out of the government it was a party of on the basis that the other parties weren't as committed to quite as radical a set of asylum policies as Mr. Wilders wanted.
Mm-hmm. So now on to these anti-migration protests, right? Who is orchestrating them? I mean, first The Hague, now Amsterdam. Are these, grassroots mobilizations, or is it a coordinated political effort?
I'm not sure it's wholly coordinated, although there's obviously a network and a lot of talking between them. And the actual organizer of this particular protest by Nederland in Opstand he's not a particularly serious fellow. I mean, he made his name as an anti-coronavirus restriction protester back in 2020. But there are obviously connections between all these groups. Their connections with organized political parties are more diffuse, but there's certainly parties like the PVV happy to encourage, tacitly approve of these kind of protests, but obviously, and even Wilders, to criticize them when they turn violent, although the potential for violence is obviously there. It manifested itself in September, and obviously there are anxieties that protests scheduled for today will also turn violent, which is why the location for this particular one in Amsterdam has been moved in the last few days.
Mm-hmm. So what grievances or fears are these people voicing, and how does it interact with the electoral process, the timeline of the election?
Well, I mean, central to these protests is an anti-asylum seeker, but indeed more broadly an anti-migrant, and really when one starts unpacking it, actually an anti-Islamic migrant set of motives. It coincides quite strongly in the current context with concerns over housing. There's a severe housing shortage in the Netherlands. Housing has become increasingly expensive for everyone, and it's easy for those with populist agendas to elide asylum seeker concerns with these concerns about housing and the availability of housing that many people in the Netherlands are concerned about, and that is indeed the number one concern in the Netherlands, with migration coming in currently only in third place.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, 250,000 people demanding ceasefire in Gaza took to the streets of Amsterdam this past Sunday. So at first, this may seem unrelated, but you've mentioned that the anti-immigration protests are also anti-Muslim, and that, Geert Wilders, he is very pro-Israeli. So how does it impact his support base?
I mean, his support, the core of the far-right message is an anti-Islamic message. This is the most kind of problematic, in their view, component of immigration to the Netherlands. They see this as fundamentally changing, challenging the way in which Holland has been organized, their sense of its values. And you've seen, but the UK has something similar at the moment, where the far right in the UK, in the Netherlands, elsewhere in Europe, sees common cause with Israel and a certain fringe of Israeli politics that is itself also very anti-Islamic. So there's definitely an alliance there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go back to June of this year, when the PVV withdrew from the coalition because of the asylum policies, right, that were not accepted by three other parties. What were some of the provisions?
I mean, what the essential thing that the PVV wants is essentially a suspension of asylum. No one should be getting asylum anymore. This was included, the possibility for introducing this measure was included in a piece of legislation that's still currently going through the Dutch Parliament. But clearly other party members were much more nervous and uncomfortable about this. I mean, other things that they were happier to agree with was suspensions and restrictions on the right to family reunion for asylum seekers, restrictions on benefits, restrictions on access to housing. So there were components that they could agree on. But the central component, the suspension of access to asylum, has proved much more contentious. And this is central to Wilders' agenda. I mean, he sees state reputation on saying there should be no more asylum seekers in the Netherlands. So this extreme position is his electoral calling card. And this is the issue that he's been keen to then campaign on in this election.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that some of these provisions could be introduced this time around? I mean, once the government is formed post-election, of course. If so, then which ones?
Well, I think this one were Wilders to be able to establish a government in which he had actual control over, which is not looking that likely, it must be said. I think this kind of legislation will enter into force and likely be triggered. I mean, as we said, the polls don't show that Wilders is likely to increase his vote share compared to 2023. So whether this is really working for him or not, we shall see. But certainly the threat that he offers to the EU asylum framework is very strong indeed. Lots of this would be very difficult to square with the EU asylum legislation. Very difficult indeed.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the election. I mean, who is poised to win, so to speak? Of course, the chances of any party securing a parliamentary majority are slim to none. But what kind of coalition can we expect?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. There's either a version of the current configuration of Wilders, far right, and there are a couple of others who are seeing their vote shares increase in recent weeks. With the center right, the VVD. I mean, that's kind of option one. The other one is a more centrist one that leans left. So the socialists are not polling amazingly historically, but they're doing reasonably well relative to recent years. So, I mean, if one freezes the picture today, it's more likely to be a center left coalition than a center right. But obviously, things can still change.
Mm-hmm. So what are the plausible post-election scenarios?
Well, I mean, I think they are these two. You either end up with a very unstable far-right, center-right coalition that is a kind of continuation of the current system, which has been, well, according to many people, fairly dysfunctional, very unstable, and still very committed to reducing immigration. Or you get a center-left coalition in which the Socialist Party, so the Green Socialists, would be the leading voice. would see a mild difference on migration policy, but still be fairly restrictive and perhaps slightly more stable.
John Dalhuisen, Senior Fellow, European Stability Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.